Okay, let's get right into this. So basically, you need to know that the Social Security Administration is more aggressively now than ever before going after bad people. But people who are truly disabled, people who are truly elderly, people who are receiving the right amount at the right time, they're okay. They're okay. But what we're seeing is essentially more of a review, more of a look into of whether or not an individual is actually the disabled person that which they claim they are, which sometimes, to be fair, they are. Sometimes, to be fair, they're not. And that's just part of the adjudication process. Now, I am a little bit sunburnt and beat, so my face looks a little bit blah. I want to get into essentially teaching you guys, like I normally do, about who's arrested, who is receiving some sort of social security benefit from the SSA. This is not a video necessarily to scare you, but to teach you about what people did that was wrong. And the reason I do these videos, and I think it's really important, is that the more knowledge you have, the more you know where the lines are, you know what they're looking for, and you know the techniques that they use to investigate people. Some of you feel that this is bad because I'm essentially showing people, where they need to stay within the lines. Because the other option is people will claim, oh, well, hey, if you show them where the lines are, then the fraudsters out there are going to know how to go ahead and fraud the system. Here's my take on it. I'd rather educate truly disabled people, truly elderly retired people, than leave them to just believe whatever they want to believe. And here's why. We get a lot of wrong information. I've been noticing advertisements on Facebook from companies, claiming to be disability representatives and things like that. And what's upsetting to me about it is that I spend a lot of time showing people what the system is, what the actual case law is, what's a summary of what happened. And then we get a lot of bullshit advertisements, unfortunately, that are forcing this idea of something that is incorrect. So, my goal here is to teach you about, in this particular video, which beneficiaries were arrested, why they were arrested, so you can understand why either you are not like them, and very likely you aren't, or why some of you are like them and how you need to kind of clean up your act. So let's get into it real quick. First one. this one is this one's very spicy. I just keep in mind too, some of these are a little bit hard to digest. So just keep in mind, it is what it is. All right, first one. Specifically a hot sheet from the Office of Inspector General. What happened was they released this on May 8th, 2025. Man accused of concealing death of disabled veteran for years to reap financial benefit. So you know what happened here, okay? Somebody was getting checks, those benefits, and then somebody dealt with that person. You know what I mean? They got rid of them, buried them under a plant, put them in a pig pen, sent them down to Mexico to put them in a 55-gallon, drum. A person disappeared, but the benefits continued. Let's rock and roll through this real quick. St. Louis. A convicted felon from Salem, Missouri, was indicted on Wednesday and accused of concealing the death of his uncle, a U.S. Army veteran with quadriplegic tendencies, for at least 5 years so that he could steal at least $650,000 of his disability benefits. So the main thing you got to keep in mind here is when people don't report that somebody passed away, I guarantee you at some point, if you are taking the benefits, they're going to find you. They're going to arrest you. Okay. Brian K. Ditch, 44, is now facing 4 felony counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of aggravated identity theft, 2 counts of theft of government property, and 1 count of being a felon in possession of a firearm, which tells you they went, they found him, they arrested him. Okay. The indictment alleges that Ditch was solely responsible for his uncle's care beginning in 2008 and kept his uncle locked in his garage and under his control so he could fraudulently obtain his government benefits. Okay, so just remember, this was 2008, solely responsible for his uncle. He locked his uncle in his garage and then basically made the uncle do whatever he wanted, him to do so that he could take the benefits from the bank account. Instead of properly caring for his uncle, Ditch trapped him in the garage for over 24 hours at a time, forcing his uncle to sit in his own urine and feces without the ability to eat or drink, the indictment says. After his uncle's death around 2019, Ditch concealed his death and the body so that he could continue to receive the money, the indictment stated. It says Ditch told relatives that he had moved his uncle into a nursing home. His uncle received $9,559 per month in disability compensation benefits from the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, the indictment says. Now, remember, some of you don't know how the VA benefit system works. Some of you are just very surprised when you start hearing that, like, somebody could get almost $10,000 a month in, compensation benefits from the VA, and you're getting $1,500 from the SSA. I know, I get it, but remember, they served our country. You maybe didn't. So, just be aware of that. All right. The VA would not have continued to pay had they known Ditch's uncle was dead, the indictment says. Ditch's uncle also received a total of $235,210 in Social Security disability insurance benefits and retirement insurance benefits from the Social Security Administration since 2008. So, in other words, this guy stole a lot of money from the VA, from the Social Security Administration, and as a result of that, this guy's got to go to jail. I didn't read this ahead of time. I knew where it was going because I saw the title, but I'm almost certain this guy's going to go to jail. Okay. But again, at the same time, I know, just to be very fair, for some reason, they don't tend to arrest these guys, even when they commit this level of fraud. But then they did talk about essentially the possession of a firearm, so they probably went and got him. Ditch used the money to buy exotic reptiles. Of course he did, because just, that's the kind of guy he is. He would also fund lavish vacations and enrich himself. The indictment says Salem police officers found the uncle's partially frozen body in a trash can in March, as well as 3 shotguns, the indictment says. As a convicted felon, Ditch is barred from possessing firearms. So we know this wasn't a good guy to begin with. We know that it wasn't a sweetheart in the long-term sense, and we know that he had 3 shotguns, which is, of course, about 3 guns too many for a convicted felon. So, that's that kind of situation. Real quick, Old School Trucker, thank you for the $2 donation. I super appreciate and love the little NES controller there. That's awesome. And also, Lisa Boston, thank you for the $4.99 donation. That's very, very cool. Very bravo, very bravo. With that said, please, everybody, remember to like. If you don't hit the like button, then YouTube doesn't know to show other people about these types of videos where we show the actual situation, the prosecutions, the law, the Supreme Court rulings, stuff like that. So it is important, if you like these videos, if you want these videos to continue going forward, to hit the like button. Now, Ditch, our wonderful felon that we love very much, is expected to plead not guilty in U.S. District Court in St. Louis Friday, which is going to be quite spicy since they found a bunch of guns and they found basically a partially frozen body in a trash can of our veteran who was receiving significant amounts of funds. Charges set forth in an indictment are merely accusations and do not constitute proof of guilt. So they can't say yet that the body was there because of him, even though Ditch was solely in control of the upkeep of his disabled veteran family member. Every defendant is presumed to be innocent unless and until proven guilty, which is very true, but I have a feeling this is going to be a spicy case. We'll do a follow-up on it. The Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General is committed to holding accountable anyone who exploits veterans and steals their VA benefits, says Special Agent in Charge Gregory Billingsley with the VA OIG's Central Field Office. VA's programs and services are established to justly compensate deserving veterans, and the VA OIG will bring to justice those who would defraud these programs. So remember, the SSA OIG, the VA OIG are becoming much more active. They're getting boosted because of what DOJ has started and pushed. So we should be seeing more of these prosecutions in the future. But keep in mind, this one goes all the way back to 2008. I mean, that is spicy. We're talking like Obama, first Trump era stuff. We're talking way back, okay? Now, the Salem Police Department, the Department of Veteran Affairs Office of Inspector General, the Social Security Administration Office of Inspector General, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives investigated the case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Derek Wiseman is prosecuting the case. So what did we learn from this particular situation? Well, what we learned is that there was a person who maybe or maybe didn't kill his uncle who was a disabled veteran. The body, right? All of it, it sounds like, was never found, but they found some of it. It was partially frozen. We know that he had the means to essentially use firearms because he had 3 shotguns, and part of the body was never found. And it sounds like a pretty darn large part of the body. So, remember, the first thing that a lot of these individuals tend to do is they tend to get out their knives and make the package smaller. It's interesting with this situation, that, obviously, he was claiming that the person was still alive, still doing well. So now what they have to figure out is exactly when, by investigating people, this individual receiving the disability compensation through the VA and SSDI benefits and retirement benefits through the SSA, they've got to figure out essentially, well, when did this person pass away? And how did he likely pass away? So they're going to study his blood, injuries, trauma. They're going to look to timelines, see when people in the community had last seen him, investigate people, find out what his, traditional actions were. But they got a problem. The prosecutors have a major problem, which is if he was controlled and kept in the basement and not able to communicate, not have a cell phone, not have a Facebook account, not have a YouTube account, not interact with the general public, not, be on the grid, then they're going to have a very tough time figuring out essentially when this person passed away. Now, as a result of that, it becomes a situation where we don't know the real truth of what happened. But very importantly, they would not have gone into this person's house and seized the guns unless they had a warrant. And it means that aside from this hot sheet report, we know that they had a warrant and they were feeling real strong about this being the person who caused the potential ultimate death of our disabled veteran. Very sad situation. Very, very, very sad situation. But again, I think it's I think it's one of those things where you just have to keep in mind these bad things do happen to disabled people. And as a result of these OIG groups, Office of Inspector General, one of the good things that people don't normally think about is that they do these investigations to find these abusers that are abusing the disabled. And this is a classic example of exactly that. Now, next case I have for you, a hot sheet directly from SSA OIG, right over here. Dominican national sentenced for passport fraud and stealing U.S. citizens' identity. Here we go. So remember, stealing of the identity, you usually get into Social Security violations because obviously our identities, our ability to do things, that are tied to us, our Social Security number, get a bank account, get a loan, get a house, whatever. It's almost always tied to a Social Security number that is created, produced, delivered by the Social Security Administration. Let's get into it. Dominican national sentenced for passport fraud and stealing U.S. citizens' identity. Boston, and this was May 8th, 2025. So very, very recent. A Dominican national residing in Fall River pled guilty today. So he pled guilty. He said, I did it. In federal court in Boston to charges related to passport fraud and other offenses. Okay, all right. So Hector Eduardo Arias Mejia, 49, was sentenced by U.S. District Court Judge Richard G. Stearns to 2 years. So he got 2 years and 1 day in prison and 1 year supervised release. They do that to make sure it sticks, that 1 day thing. The defendant is also subject to deportation upon completion of the imposed sentence. So we've got basically an immigrant who essentially, let's see, Dominican national residing in Fall River. So it could be an illegal immigrant who will be in jail in this country. And then once his jail sentence is complete, we will be shipping him away where he can do criminal acts in another country, hopefully one that will also crack down on them. The defendant is also subject to deportation upon completion of the imposed sentence. In March 2025, Arias Mejia pled guilty to misuse of Social Security number. So there's your Social Security crime. Aggravated identity theft and making a false statement in an application for a United States passport. In December of 2023, Arias Mejia was indicted by a federal grand jury. According to the charging documents, Arias Mejia unlawfully used the identity of a United States citizen from Puerto Rico since at least 2011. Now, you may have noticed, my shoe just fell off. You may have noticed, okay, because I was itching a mosquito bite. You may have noticed that there does seem to be a lot of theft related to, for example, Social Security numbers from U.S. citizens that are living in Puerto Rico some of which end up in a 55-gallon drum with acid. So in 2011, using stolen identity, Arias Meja was convicted in the Fall River District Court of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon for which he served an 18-month jail sentence. In 2006, again using the stolen identity, Arias Meja was convicted in the Fall River District Court of 3 counts of possession with intent to distribute drugs and was sentenced to 2 years in jail. Now, I know some of you feel very strongly that immigrants are the solution to everything in America. I know that the Democratic Party took a hard lean, not so much in favor of Social Security recipients, more so in favor of immigrants, although Biden did have a saving grace by putting in Commissioner Martin O'Malley, who did an amazing job as commissioner. But I think one of the things we have to kind of realize with this stuff is that America needs lots of immigrants. We need them because our fertility rates are very bad. But we need lots of honest, hardworking, tax-paying immigrants. So just to be fair, that is the situation we need to move towards, as opposed to whatever the F we had before. The investigation was conducted by Homeland Security, Investigation Document, and Benefit Fraud Task Force, a specialized investigative group comprised personnel from various state, local, and federal agencies with expertise in detecting, deterring, and disrupting organizations and individuals involved in various types of document identity and benefit fraud schemes. The United States Attorney Leah B. Foley and Michael J. Kroll, a special agent in charge of Homeland Security investigations in New England, made the announcement. Valuable assistance was provided by a bunch of other agencies. I'm not going to go through them all, but the bottom line is there were a whole paragraph worth of investigative agencies working to basically go after these people. So what happens is this, okay? We essentially can learn from this particular case that, yes, this country has individuals that should not be here, okay? Yes, this country has felons that seem to be able to keep getting back into the country. Yes, they keep committing crimes. Yes, they keep selling, unfortunately, drugs to people, and it ruins lives. You know, the big thing that I just want to give a real quick side note because I want people to understand this. One of the things that surprised me the most about Social Security benefits and people who are basically trying to obtain them is that there's an entire generation of people who became disabled because of drug abuse and use. And what happened was, what they would do is, once they had paved the roads to some of these smaller towns, those dealers would get into those towns and the kids would get hooked on drugs. And then the parents would have to inherit the grandchildren, take care of the grandchildren in order to keep them away from their kids who had ruined their life and continued to ruin their life. So, you know, when people are like, well, we really need to fight drugs in this country, blah, 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 blah. No, you don't get it. We literally don't have a system that's going to work for retirement benefits because an entire generation didn't pay into retirement benefits because they were hooked on drugs. Some drugs are things like video games. Some drugs are things like alcohol. But at the end of the day, they were hooked so bad that they became unable to take care of the kids that they had. And to be fair, they had a lot of kids. That's just the reality. There were a lot of kids that were adopted by the grandparents. The grandparents take care of the children. And some of those children, as a result of these drugs, alcohol, etc., have disabling conditions because, you guessed it, you know, the kid is the extension of the body that it's being born from. So, you know, it is what it is. I know some of you will be offended by what I just said. I get that. I don't think it's right or appropriate that somebody would be offended by that. But again, many people live inside a clamshell, you know, basically, you know, hoping that they'll never have to see the world for what it is. And I really commend a lot of you for sticking with this channel and learning about the realities, the actuals, the main things that are going on. Because at the end of the day, if you don't learn what's actually going on, you're just going to keep voting for the same political BS that you always do. And we get it from both sides. Republicans have lots of BS. Democrats have lots of BS. And unfortunately, the BS seems to be a very deep swimming pool, especially when the billionaires are in control of the seats that are being filled. And that seems to be mostly the people who can actually get voted in, because otherwise, who's going to pay for the entire party, right? That's how that works. Next one. Union man sentenced to 24 months in prison. So he did something pretty significant for $900,000 COVID-19 relief program fraud. I mean, that is a ton of fraud. And what always blows me away about this fraud this like, program, COVID-19 relief program fraud. It took me forever to get my COVID, basically payroll assistance. It took me forever to get that. It took well over a year to get that stuff. These guys were rocking and rolling and submitting $900,000. I mean, shit, you know what I mean? But it's just, it does piss me off, just like it pisses you guys off. Newark, New Jersey. What a surprise. A New Jersey man was sentenced to 24 months in prison for his role in a scheme to fraudulently obtain a payroll protection program PPP loan. U.S. Attorney Alina Haba announced Joseph McKeon, aka J. McKeon, 54 of Westfield, New Jersey. I know Westfield well. Previously pled guilty on November 19th, 2024, before U.S. District Judge Julian Xavier Niels to an information charging him with one count of wire fraud, where they get you hard. When you do wire fraud, they hit you real hard with jail and all that stuff, even if it's small. And one count of money laundering. Also, they hit you hard with that stuff. Judge Niels imposed the sentence in Newark Federal Court, according to the documents filed in this case and statements made in court from February 2021 to February 2022. So we're talking Biden era. McKeon submitted fraudulent PPP loan and forgiveness applications for $900,000 on behalf of a New Jersey company he owned. In support of those applications, McKeon lied about the number of employees and business employees and the income the employees earned. McKeon also submitted forged documents, including fake payroll information, bank statements, tax return documents. I don't know how people do this. Like, don't you think the government's going to look at that? Don't you think the government's going to be like, hey, your company only makes this much, you're paying this much in payroll? I never got that. Like, it's guys, all these documents have to cross-check themselves. You know what I mean? This isn't like a thing where you can just make shit up and submit it. After the victim lender funded the loan, McKeon withdrew a significant amount of the loan proceeds as cash and made several large transfers between bank accounts, including one transfer of $315,503.75, which is just under the amount I owe in student loans, that was sent to an Indiana title company. Remember, when you guys are sitting there and you listen to like Dave Ramsey, and Dave's like, you shouldn't feel bad for those kids that did like, special civil learning, college degree about like how to, sing along to the Barney song, at an academia collegiate level degree, and they have their $100,000 debt. Yeah, well, let me explain to you the other side of that. If you get a master's and you get a doctorate and you get specialty postdoctorate stuff attached to it, and you end up with a massive amount in a failing economy, then you don't end up with $100,000 in debt. You end up with $500,000 in debt of student loans. So just remember, when you're sitting there going, oh, the lawyers, oh, they have it so good. No, we don't make enough to pay back the debt of law school for the most part now. It is a total shit show system. It's disgusting. It blows my mind. Let's keep rolling. In addition to the prison term, Judge Niels sentenced McKeon to 2 years of supervised release and ordered to pay $900,000 in restitution. So in other words, the judge doesn't trust this person and is going to be following them closely. So U.S. Attorney Haba accredited Special Agent of IRS Criminal Investigation under the direction of Special Agent in Charge Jennifer L. Pjovison, Special Agents of the Social Security Administration, Office of the Inspector General, under the direction of Special Agent in Charge Amy Connolly, and Special Agents blah, 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 blah. The government is represented by Assistant U.S. Attorney Benjamin D. Bleiberg of the Economic Crimes Unit in Newark. So they also use the District of New Jersey COVID-19 Fraud Enforcement Strike Force is one of 5 strike forces established throughout the United States by the U.S. Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute COVID-19 fraud. The strike forces focus on large-scale, multi-state pandemic relief fund perpetrated by criminal organizations and transnational actors. The strike forces are an interagency law enforcement effort using prosecutor-led and data analyst-driven teams designed to identify and bring to justice those who stole pandemic relief funds. Anyone with any information about allegations or attempted fraud involving COVID-19 can report it by calling the Department of Justice's National Center for Disaster Fraud Hotline 866-720-5721. All right, what can we learn from this case? Look, if you own a business, don't be a toffee toss it. Don't be a special princess. Don't be a butterfly banana. Don't be a silly Sillins. They're going to find out. All of these documents, like payroll, it links up to a program. called a literal payroll program or an accounting program or your bank. Like nobody has pure cash businesses anymore. It's just it doesn't work that way anymore. Like nobody does that. Nobody has that. So when this guy way over, I mean, $900,000, shit. You know what I mean? Like, come on, dude. All of your documents are going to integrate, deliver information. They got to make sense. They got to communicate with each other. It doesn't make sense to do this kind of stuff. All right. So, what did we learn in summary from basically these hot sheets from the Social Security Administration's OIG? Well, we learned that you have to submit your financial documents and they have to be accurate. We learned that if you're going to, steal benefits from a disabled veteran and then, have a tough time hiding the body properly and, be a felon and have 3 shotguns and, keep stealing the benefits potentially thereafter, like, maybe this, just to be fair, maybe like, at the end of the day, I don't know. Maybe you should just not steal the benefits of disabled people. Like maybe just not do that. That's going to cause some problems, okay? Illegal immigrants, legal immigrants, stealing passport fraud, stealing of identities. It's all over the place. It's all over these OIG hot sheets. It happens all the time. This is not something that is uncommon. So to be fair, when people tell me and they're like, "Oh, well, blah, 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 yada, 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 yada." When they tell me this stuff and I look at the situation, I think to myself, hey, guys, you know what I mean? Like, and that's the other thing that I think I've been a little bit offended by. Okay, so here's the thing. Some of you're disabled. You don't have money, right? You don't have money. You just don't have money, okay? Some of you are in a situation where at the end of the day, you just like you don't have what you need to make it through the month. What you need to understand is that the politicians, their goal is not to make you happy. Their goal is to make the party win, and then the goal above that is to keep them in office. So remember, politicians are great at the me, myself role. They are worried about me, myself, this guy, the person right here, this one. That's what politicians are worried about. So if you follow the metric, right, the hierarchy, right, the taxonomy, right, of they're worried about themselves, they're worried about the party, they're worried about, their donors, and then the donors are sometimes above that, and then you're down here like 5 levels. They worry about essentially, to be fair, they worry about you real low on the totem pole. What you kind of have to understand is that as a result of all of this, when it comes to future votes, you are not the key to a party's success. I know that sounds bad. Because many of you are like, well, I'm not going to vote for that person. Blah, 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 blah. They don't give a shit. How much? No shit at all. They don't care. It's literally not part of their worry at night. Not a problem, not an issue, not at all. It's just not part of the problem where they're like, oh, I wish I da 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 da. No. They don't care. Because remember, they owe allegiance to donors, the party, themselves, before you even get on the phone inside their head. Now, what's worth more? People that they have to convince to go ahead and vote for them by giving them better benefits as Americans? Well, how are they going to give you better benefits, right? They got to get all the House people together, all the Senate people together, and the president to even make that happen. That's too hard. That's way too hard. Isn't it easier just to let immigrants in, get them naturalization under a particular party, and then get them to vote a certain way? And that's one of the things I just wish people understood. Like, as an American, it is too hard to fix it for you specifically if they don't have the House, the Senate, and the president. Now, you could get a president that, like Commissioner Martin O'Malley would do a lot of cool stuff to help the disabled and retired. Or you could get a president like Trump. Trump is a very economy-driven individual. He's a very business-oriented individual. People will always argue that his business has failed, but it's always weird hearing from EEs, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but when employees tell me about the way business works, I very quietly have an internal moment where I think this person has no clue how it actually works. And, I'm respectful. I let them tell me. But when people tell me about like how Trump failed this business and the university and this and that, and da da da, dude, you're right. He had too much going on. He didn't prioritize. He didn't put his name and background into those companies to make it work. And they stained his reputation. And that's what made him going forward know that he has to protect the Trump enterprise more because he effed up. But there is no billionaire out there who doesn't have 20, 30 companies that haven't failed under them. In fact, they have an entire show about that called Shark Tank. They give them some funding, they see if the thing will win. And then people are like totally surprised when, like, out of the 50 companies they started that year, only 10 of them survived and did well. And they're like, oh, they must be a terrible billionaire. Like, how do you expect me to respond to that? And that's the thing. I just don't. I just respectfully like stand back because I'm like, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It is what it is. People, if people knew how companies and money and executives and CEOs and presidents and VIPs and vice president, if people knew how all that shit worked, if they knew, they wouldn't be doing it the way they're doing it. And so that's why when I sit back and I look at this, situation, right? These OIG hot sheets, who frauded who stole what, who did this, who did that. When I see this stuff, what I realize is like, we don't have a system that's specifically set up to protect Americans at the level needed. And the only reason we don't have that is because Americans aren't in the top 3 of concerns of politicians, which is kind of weird considering it's our country. We own this pup, So at the end of the day, I hope you guys consider that. I hope you guys understand, some of that stuff. You look at Democrat billionaires, you look at Republican billionaires, they start companies, they end companies. And that's the other thing too. A lot of people don't realize that it is more profitable to buy up a company, split it up, and sell its assets as separate entities than it is to sell the company in total. Okay, that's one of the things. Like, one of the things that I've realized when it comes to financial illiteracy, when it comes to a lot of disabled individuals, is that they're like, oh, well, this company is a thing. No, the company is a lot of packaged assets that can be split up and reorganized into purchasable packages, right? And these purchasable packages are worth different things to different people. Buyer A might want package B. Buyer C might want package H. Buyer D might want package M, right? And they're willing to pay more money for it. Did you just destroy a company? Yes. Did you make a lot of money doing it? Yes. That's how they work. That's how those rich people work. Money is a tool. It's not a survival thing. It's a tool to have more. And it is what it is. And look, you need both types of people. That's another thing too. Somebody said to me, oh, the disabled people, hey, I had this one conversation with this guy. Those disabled people, they take so much money from us. They take so much money from us. How dare they? And I said to the guy, I said, look, let me ask you something. And he's like, what? And I was like, who of the disabled people do you think invented most of the shit at NASA? Who of the disabled people do you think invented a lot of the products that caused California to have that massive tech boom? Because if autistic people weren't here, you wouldn't have unlimited mental capacity, potential human beings achieving the unlocking of the secrets of products that make people's lives better. If we don't have disabled people and we just had a bunch of average intelligence going along with the, role and having a good time people, we wouldn't have washing machines. We wouldn't. We just wouldn't. I mean, we wouldn't have had the creation of the motor. We wouldn't have the creation of the rollers. We wouldn't have creation of the metal body fabrication. We wouldn't have any of that. You need disabled people to make products that are great for society. You know why? Because disabled people are always trying to find a better way to live their life because the way of life isn't as smooth of a road for them. But again, not a popular thing. All right. I will catch you all a little bit later. I'm going to be doing the next video where we talk about the Supreme Court details of what's going on with Trump requesting the Supreme Court to give DOGE more power, review, presence within the SSA. We're going to be doing 2 more videos, and then later tonight, after I do some more stuff, because I have to work with some people on a letter that's due, 2 appeals council briefs that are due, a submission to the judge. Once I get that stuff done, then I will be on later tonight to do additional videos, unless it's like really stormy and my internet connection is total crap. That sometimes happens. All right. With that said, please remember to like. Please remember to subscribe. Okay. Hit the like button. It's not going to hurt you. Give a little tap tap. Also, if you enjoy these videos, please head over to Google and type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. Throw some stars up there if you like. It's totally up to you. I love seeing them. They get me giddy in the morning and very, very excited about the day. Which is tougher every single day. With that said, I think this is very important. I also go live normally on Mondays and Thursdays. Everything's been all over the place this week. I'm sorry I haven't been live. I still love you. I hope you love me. I give you a big hug. Okay. Also, there is basically a mini contract below for doing a 1-hour private session. People tend to love those. Those are getting all snookered up and taken. So it is what it is. Now, with that said, if you need a disability attorney, I'm going to tell you, go call 5 of them. Okay. If you need somebody to represent you, you've already filed, you need somebody to follow you, go call 5 of them. Call me. You can call me, but go call 5 of them. See which one you like. Okay. And always remember to ask how much of a percentage of a referral fee would that attorney have to pay to some other service or group before taking on your claim? Because if they got to pay 25% to some group that like sent them the claim, that sent you to them, that advertised and you clicked on the advertisement, then that attorney doesn't have that additional money to spend on your claim, and that's not a good situation. All right. I will catch you all a little bit later. You have a wonderful day, and we will be catching up in the not too distant future in about 10 minutes. Attorney Walter Hnot, most of you subscribed to and clicked on Disability Attorney in America. Have fun, and we will catch up from there. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.